What's up, y'all? I'm Han.
And I'm Dad.
And we're here to give biblical solutions
for some of life's crazy problems.
Welcome to the Han&Dad podcast.
Yes.
Well, Dad, what do you feel like talking about on today's episode?
Well, I think a real important topic for everyone listening would be to discuss some things about parenting.
That's a good one.
In today's times, and maybe some struggles that young parents are going through, and then also thinking about how, like, folks my age that have raised their children, have adult children now, is our parenting over? I mean, are we still in the picture, or anything that we can do? And,
when does parenting stop?
Right. Yeah. And really think about it. I guess that the parenting, as far as when it stops, maybe is dependent upon the culture. You know, in certain cultures, it was interesting. I saw a TV show the other day, and in certain cultures, you know, when the adult children get older and they marry, they actually build another level on the house.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they build another level, and so depending on how
honestly pretty cool.
Yeah, and so they live there, and in certain cultures, of course, as the parents get older, it's a given. You're going to move those parents back in the house, take care of them, and so. But I think in America, what would you say is the average age where a lot of people would say, okay, parenting stops
18.
at age? Yeah, there you go, 18.
Yeah, maybe 21, but probably 18.
Yeah, and why is that? Why do we set those standards? And again, going back to the biblical truths, is there anything in the Bible that says once you're 18, that's it? You got to be out of the house, done, have your career set, have your family in order and all that. But it's an interesting maybe tradition, or just things within our culture. But I know there's a lot of struggles for some of the young parents these days. So you're at the age where y'all looking at having a family pretty soon and be parents.
Yeah, hopefully soon.
So what are some things your generation you think kind of struggles with, or maybe we could address, have some answers to, or just give some advice to?
I think for our generation, the number one struggle is definitely going to be the cost of living. Right now in today's economy, everything is just through the roof expensive. Oh my goodness, everything is so expensive. But I would say the second problem is probably having a stable home life. You know, for your children, I would say most people I know of that have kids, the father's not in the picture, maybe even the mother's not in the picture, or maybe both parents aren't in the picture. You know, and what do you do when you're trying to raise a kid on your own and you're still very young yourself? You know, I'm only 25. That's still pretty young to start a family and everything.
Yeah, and they're all different kinds of situations. You know, some families do have the husband and wife in the home, and then some are single parents, whether it's the father or the mother, and some of them going through that situation. And then I think what we're seeing a lot today, too, is the multi-generational homes, you know, because of the economy and things.
Yeah.
You can't just get out and be on your own at 18, 19, 20 and be buying a home and things like that. But, yeah, the first thing you mentioned is the economy. And I saw on my news feed a couple of days ago, it said that's one of the main struggles for young parents these days is they feel they're having trouble being effective parents because of the economy and the cost of things. And don't you think that maybe stress comes into that somehow?
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah, not being able to provide for your family. I mean, I can't even imagine. I really truthfully can't imagine.
Yeah, and you know, when it comes to whether you're 20, 25, 30, 40 and you've got kids, especially your dependent kids living in the home, you're trying to take care of them. As a mother and a father, when you're working, you have to understand as a parent, like it or not, you still have that added stress of just trying to live your life as an individual, live your life as a provider, live your life as a parent. And what happens when the economy goes south like it has, and of course that's up for debate. You know, people can debate that, but I think a lot of people think that the economy's not too good as far,
no, it's not.
As far as the prices of things. So that causes stress on you as a person.
Yeah.
And I think what the parents were saying is they didn't like that because they struggled with that, and then they had to transition from dealing with that stress of how we're going to pay the bills, you know, how we're going to pay the mortgage, how we're going to do this for the kids, and then transition, take that over and deal with that before you go to the kids. And I think that's a big problem sometimes. We as adults, we put that off on the kids.
Yep.
And, you know, we've talked some about that as y'all have gotten older. And that's one thing that I did. I would say to the parents today, the young parents, don't make some of the mistakes that I did. And if you can't share that you made mistakes when you get a little older, then you know you probably hadn't been a real
Right,
good
you haven't
parent.
learned anything.
Hadn't learned anything.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I did. Talked about, you know, money, finances, and stuff. And a lot of people do that in front of the kids.
Yeah.
And that's one thing. If you can at all help that, not that you don't need to talk to them about the value of money, paying your bills, but when we as parents bring that stress into parenting the kids,
It weighs on the children heavily.
I think those kids feel it.
Yeah, I definitely felt like I can remember from like being 7 years old, you know, worrying about finances, worrying about if we're going to get school clothes or if I was going to be able to get a book bag because we were struggling with money so much. And I could definitely feel that in the home, but also hearing y'all talk about it, it did weigh on me. And I think for some parents, they just talk openly, thinking that maybe your children don't understand because they're so young, but that's not the case. Children are a lot smarter than you think they are, and they do pick up on things. So just like you said, I would recommend to parents as well, you know, if you are struggling with finances or anything you may be struggling with, to talk about that with your spouse in private. You know, keep the children separate and let them see you as just like a parent who has it together. So that way they don't have the stress of the real life issues.
Right. And I think that's where the biblical truth comes in for the parents. If we as parents aren't walking closely with the Lord, then it always comes out in other areas. And so I would say the first step maybe of being a really good parent is to make sure that your relationship with God is right. And from that, and deal with those stresses. The Bible talks a lot about money and God providing, and it really is. It's about working hard, but it's also about faith, believing that God's going to provide for you. And if we as parents will do that, trust God, do our best, trust God, make good financial decisions, then we won't carry that stress over to the kids.
Yep.
And so in turn, what does that teach the kids? It's teaching them to trust
in God.
Trust in God. And again, I think another big step for parents is to admit when you made a mistake.
Yep.
You know, I mean, of course, when your kids are 1, 2, and 3, they can't really understand that. But as they get older, there's nothing wrong with going to your kids and telling them that you made some mistakes. Ask for forgiveness.
Yeah, that's actually what Pastor Jensen Franklin's daughter, that's what she did. She asked her 9-year-old daughter, she said, "What's the greatest thing that I've done as a parent?" And her daughter told her, you know, telling me that you're sorry. And she said, out of everything I do for you, being at all of your sporting events, taking you to school, cooking you dinner, everything that I do for you, the greatest thing is apologize. You're telling me that that's it. And she said, yeah, that's it. And she said, because it tells me that you're not perfect. And it shows that we all make mistakes, but that we can overcome those mistakes and become greater. And I said, wow, that's so true.
And that's really opening yourself up, being vulnerable. And I wonder if we could challenge the listeners, if you have kids that are of age to understand, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10, you know, older teenagers, have a little family meeting.
Yeah.
And ask the kids to freely share and be vulnerable, and ask them, is there anything that you want to tell us where you feel we've made mistakes in parenting?
Wow, that helped a lot,
If you really want to open that relationship, and what is that going to do? That's going to show them, number one, you're not perfect.
Right.
And you do make mistakes, but it gives them an input that maybe they feel like they've never had before.
Yeah.
You know,
and they'll trust more in you and know that they can come to you to talk about anything because you're asking them, you know, how are you doing, so they can communicate with you how they're feeling, and they'll trust you to give them good advice, so they'll come to you in the future.
Right. Yeah. And one thing, I was reading, of course, in Ephesians chapter number 6, it gives a couple of great thoughts on parenting. But one of the first things it says in verse number 1, children, obey your parents in the Lord. And I was thinking about that. Sometimes as parents, we say, well, you just do as I say. You listen to me.
Follow blindly.
And if you want biblical solutions to parenting, look at what that scripture says. It says, children, obey your parents. But again, you got to put it in context. Yep. It says, in the Lord. And so as parents, we need to ask ourselves, are we asking our children to obey us as we follow the Lord and as we give them good instruction?
Wow.
Because a lot of times children get abused because the parents get angry and they say, just do as I say.
Right.
Well, what are you saying? Is what you're living matching up with what you're saying? And how many parents out there, and we see it all the time on TV shows and everything, we think, oh boy, I'd just like to set that parent straight. Sometimes parents will ask their kids to do just awful things.
Yeah,
Talk about your mom, or do this to your mom, or do this to your dad, or do things sometimes even illegal.
Yeah.
But even as parents, if we want to be good godly parents, you've got to come from a biblical perspective, and so they are to obey you in the Lord, but make sure we're teaching our kids biblical truths.
Yeah.
And the way to act in school or in public, on the job, or whatever, with integrity. And
well, maybe not in school anymore, because they're trying to pass that law. Did you see not having Bibles in school anymore?
No, I know. Of course, years ago they took, voted to take prayer out of school and the Bible readings. But
do you think that's had any influence on the younger generation by taking prayer out of schools? And
I believe that we see that in society as a whole.
Yeah.
And again, that's one of those topics that is up for debate, and I'm open for debate, criticism on that. But I do believe that we can see things, and I actually did a study on this where I preached a sermon, and there's certain things that have happened that have gotten worse in society. And people say, well, there's more people now to do crimes and things like that. But there were certain things that have happened over the years since they took prayer out of school.
Mm-hmm.
On the negative side, more crimes and things like that with the children and young people. And I'm telling you, if you believe in the Bible and you're a Christian parent, I believe you will agree it makes a difference.
Yeah.
Think about it like this. What if the children of today, if the Bible and prayer were taken now out of school, if it were taken out of the family, taken out of church services, taken out of society, and a child growing up in this society and go move ahead 20 years from now, every child brought up had no access to prayer, no access to the Bible.
Gosh, I can't imagine.
And think about what that would look like. And so if we agree, yeah, it might be a little worse than if they do have access. Well, if you take away one part of that, it does make a difference.
I agree.
And how many young people today, kids in school, they don't get prayer in school and not allowed to maybe not allowed to pray or read their Bible. And then a lot of times we take for granted, well, they get it in the home.
Yeah.
And there's so many parents today, they're busy.
Right.
And they're going trying to make a living.
With their children.
And they neglect that time praying, reading the Bible stories.
Yeah, so they're not getting it from anywhere.
Right. And so sometimes we expect them to go out in a world with really no biblical foundation. And part of what, I believe in, again, this is a opinion. All this stuff has to be opinion when
Right.
really talking about certain things. But my opinion is I believe we see that in the professional world with a lot of professional athletes, professional musicians, singers, actors, or whatever. We see things just collapsing when they get all this money, they get fame, they don't know what to do with it. And listen, there can be Christian young people that come out of a great home, they still make mistakes. I'm just saying, overall, it seems like there are more people that get this fame, get notoriety, and they don't know how to handle it. So you see these big moral failures, whereas a lot of times the kids, and we keep going back to Tim Tebow. We throw Tim Tebow out there a lot.
Huge Tim
but
Tebow
he's
fan.
a great example. And Sadie Robertson, the Robertson family.
Oh, my gosh. I love Sadie Robertson.
Well, she's married now. That's her maiden name.
Has 2 kids.
And we see some of that. And we can't deny that when you have that biblical foundation from a young age, it helps people when they become adults, young adults, they have a platform, a foundation.
Yep.
Because life comes at you fast.
Yep.
And taking that out of school is awful, because that's one of the things I want to talk about too, about school and parenting. Your age coming up, and young parents today that have school age kids, y'all are facing something that we never faced, and that is having the schools dictate what they teach the kids.
Yeah.
Oh boy, and that's a hot issue, because it's all wonderful if you agree with it.
Right.
But if you don't
There's
agree with it, right, and you think it's not biblical, and sometimes whether it's immoral or just issues you don't agree with, all of a sudden you don't have that freedom, or don't feel like you have that freedom to teach your children. And so I think that's why we're seeing, more people homeschooling.
Yeah.
They're kids.
Yeah, Teresa and I have actually talked about that. If we ever have children, I would have to look into a private school for sure and figure out what they're teaching our children, because you don't want to send them to school and then be taught something completely different and then come home and try to reteach them, if you will.
Right.
It's going to mess with them, and then they're going to be like, well, what do I believe? And they're probably going to turn to the school because of peer pressure, because the other students are acting the exact same way, so they're going to want to act like that.
Right. And again, and some parents say, well, that's fine. That's good when they're teaching something they want. Okay.
Right.
Just take two different sides of the issue. If a school is teaching, hey, it's okay, the transgender issue, same-sex marriage issue, and topics of debate, and they say, well, sure, if you're first grade, second grade, and you were born a male and you want to become female, you don't need to talk to your parents.
Yeah.
Just talk to a counselor.
Right.
We'll set that up. We'll get that going.
That's terrible.
We'll do the search, and that sounds like, oh, that's just not the case. But there are schools that are trying to get that where the
enforce
parents,
that.
The parents
the child
don't
doesn't
have
even know who they are.
a chance to say that, and some people say, well, let the kids decide. That's fine. We should support that. Okay. Other side of the coin. Now all of a sudden you find out your kid comes home. Mom, guess what happened? Dad, guess what happened? They taught us a Bible lesson in school today. They brought this guy in. He was a preacher. And he started teaching us a Bible lesson.
I'm sure there'd be issues with that.
Oh, yeah. Then wait a minute. You can't do that. Don't you teach my child the Bible. We don't believe in that.
Right.
So you got to be careful with that.
Yeah, you can't force these things on kids.
Yeah, the school, and I think we all agree, the school system should not. Well, not everybody will agree. I can't make a blanket statement, but I think a lot of us would agree as parents. We do not want the school system to have authority over our children.
Yep.
And that is not biblical.
Yep.
Nowhere in the Bible does it say you send your kids to school to teach them about spiritual things, to teach them about life. They're supposed to be taught in the home, and school is just an additional education.
Right.
But sometimes I saw where, and if you're one of these parents, don't mean to offend you, but if you're one of these parents, then hopefully this will help you. I saw where a teacher resigned after like maybe 24, 25 years of teaching.
Oh, wow.
And she said, I'm just tired of being a glorified babysitter. She said the parents don't have any interaction with their kids hardly. They send them to school and there are no reinforcement from the parents. And she said, I'm just tired of it. I can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
So parents, you don't just send your kids to school for a daycare. You be involved with them. See what they're learning. Spend time with them, and that's good for the parent and for the kids.
Yeah, I would say for our generation, and honestly, the generation above ours, like our parents even, it seems like they were not or are not super involved in their children's lives. And, I don't know if, like you were saying, if it's a cultural thing, but I feel like down in Florida, when we grew up in Chipley, Florida, everyone was very involved with their children. They were pushing them to do sports, pushing them to be the best in school, involved, taking them to church, spending time with them. And then when we moved to Brevard, North Carolina, it was like the exact opposite. Most of my friends didn't have both parents in the home. Some didn't even have any parents in the home. They weren't super involved. They were being raised by their grandparents, didn't even know their parents at all. And I was like, what do you mean you don't have parents? Like, that was a first for me, because I thought that everyone had parents bringing them up in the ways of the Lord. But that's just not the case. And I would say that majority of people don't have both of their parents in the home.
Yeah.
You know, and that is a big struggle, not having a father figure, especially, they always talk about having a father figure for a male, but that can be just as difficult for a female. I know a lot of females that don't have father figures, and they have suffered tremendously for it, trying to find that father figure, and other men struggling in relationships and stuff. And it can affect a daughter just as much as a son not having that father, and vice versa. Not having a mother can affect a child, oh my goodness, greatly, because you need to have someone that you can look to, that can protect you and that you can trust in. And when you don't have that, where are you going to turn to?
Right.
Other things, drugs, alcohol, other kinds of...
Yeah, promiscuity.
Exactly.
Things like that.
Exactly. And you're not going to find anything in that. You have to have those parents. But what would you say to someone who doesn't have those parents? Because, that's not your fault. If you don't have parents in the home, that is not on the child. That is not the child's fault. Some people take that very personally and think, what is it? Why doesn't my dad want me? Why didn't my mom want me? And that is not on you. And just like you said, if the parents would take accountability and own up to the fact that it's them, you would have more parent-children relationships that are strong in the ways that the Lord wants them to be. Yeah. But what would you say to someone who's unable to have that relationship with their parents.
Well, and that's what's so hard, because the kids sometimes don't have much of a choice.
Right.
And now you get, 15, 16, 17 years old. I mean, you're talking different than 5, 6, 7 year old.
Yeah.
And, back to, the broken homes in a society where any statistic you look at is pretty close, about 50% of marriages ending in divorce. And so that usually puts a child, in a situation living with one parent or the other.
Right.
And so that's why, I'd say to the children, if you've got a loved one that you trust, if might be some young folks watching, they live with a grandparent, live with an aunt or uncle, be thankful
Right.
for and respect them.
They're still parental figures.
Right. They're still, authority figures over you, and talk with them, but unfortunately, as much as grandparents love their grandkids and aunts and uncles love their nieces and nephews, and sometimes even, cousins or something, trying to raise the young people, it's just not the same as a mother and father in the home. So again, being a great parent begins with a great marriage.
Yeah.
And so
having that firm foundation.
Right. So,
that's what Jensen Franklin was preaching on the other day.
But so many people just don't have that, and the single parents and things like that. So it's about being all that you can be for God, and living that godly life, so that you can be, whether it's the parent, grandparent, to help that child as much as you can. But I think that's what upsets us so much when we see children, any kind of verbal abuse, physical abuse. Sometimes they just don't have a choice.
Yeah, it breaks my heart.
They just don't have a choice. And so we as parents and as society, we got to make sure those children are protected.
Yeah.
And I am glad for
sure.
For our governmental systems and all that take those children out of those abused homes, put them in a home where there's some loving guidance. But back to the issue a little bit of the older parents for just a minute. Well, a lot of people think, well, parenting ends at 18 or so, and so then you're done. What would you like to say? Your generation. Okay, hold on here.
Man.
Wait a minute. Now, don't get personal with this, Hannah. Not too personal, but if you were a spokesperson,
man.
you're the voice of the young generation.
Gosh.
What would you like to say to my generation about parenting? When does that end? Or maybe even as a young adult, what do you look for in,
that's a good question.
Parents, as you continue on through life? Obviously, we're not going to tell you what to do. You're under our authority. But what do you see as is parenting over at 18?
Well, that truly depends on your definition of parenting. If you're talking about discipline and all of that, I would say that parenting, quote unquote, parenting in that sense, that should end at 21 years old if you're trying to do like the disciplinary role, because they are a grown adult. You can't really do anything at that point. They think for themselves. They're their own human being. They're living their lives the way they want to. You just got to let them go. They're 21 years old. But from a loving parental standpoint and giving that godly advice, I think that kind of quote unquote parenting, which should be true parenting, I think that should last a lifetime. I hope and pray that for the rest of my life and for Tyrese's life, y'all have been wonderful parents to him as well, and to my best friend Joshy. Shout out to you. Y'all have been wonderful role models for him as well. And to Jacob, Dewey Louie, shout out to you, buddy. Y'all have been wonderful role models for him as well, And I hope and pray that any of us can call on you at any point in time. And I believe wholeheartedly that we could call on y'all at any time, at any age, and y'all would be there for us, because y'all have that true parental love that all parents should have for their children. Well,
and the key word, I agree with that one key word you said, there to give advice.
Yep.
Because obviously, you're 21, I mean, by all measures, you're legal adult, do pretty much whatever, except for maybe drive a rental car. Isn't it like 25 for rental cars?
Some rental
like
cars has to be 25.
But anyway, you're adult. So after that, some people think, well, my job is done. They're on their own. Best
good
luck
riddance.
to you. Yeah. But the Bible is clear. As you get older, it talks about the man having gray hair, wisdom, those kind of things. We should always be there as parents. And I know we're talking to a lot of parents that have a multi-generational home, maybe have kids and grandkids living there in this society and the economy. So I would say to us, be there for advice, because in this world, of course, as a Christian, you got Jesus. Besides that, if you don't have family in this world, what do you have? And
Wow,
at
that's a good
25,
point.
35, I'm 54, but my father and my stepfather have passed on. And so as far as a, male role model in my life, I don't really have anybody. And there are times at 54 years old, I'll tell you publicly, I wish I had an older role model to call up and say, so what is this about, buying a home? I've never done this. What does that mean? What are some things to look for? What's some advice
Yeah.
you would give? Not tell me how to do it and that's the only way to do it, but
Right.
give advice. And so as the children are getting older, if we as an older generation will give that godly advice, still pray for wisdom and share, I don't think, as long as you are here on this earth, I don't think your job or calling, opportunity, your the blessing of being a parent is ever over.
Yeah.
As long as you can keep giving advice. But so many times we see it, and that relationship either gets severed or pride comes in.
Yeah.
And now the adult is talking to the older parent, and they're like, oh, disagree on this. Well, that's it. I'm done with you. Well, I'm done with you.
Yep.
And then who do they have? And you miss out on the grandparenting.
Yeah.
You miss out on those things. And so,
It's so sad.
it's just an ongoing thing. I believe God expects that.
I 100% agree. And
Yeah.
I think if you are working on becoming the best version of yourself for God and working on being a true Christian, God will bless your future generations to come, your children and your children's children. That's another thing that Pastor Jensen Franklin's daughter was preaching on. She was talking about how her grandma went to the outhouse and was writing scriptures back from, I believe it was like the 1920s, and was writing down different prayers and scriptures for their family. And she said, I believe that we're standing here on this platform today because of her, because she was working on who she needed to be. And I wholeheartedly believe that if you do that, God will bless the generations to come.
Yeah, and the Bible talks about it called a legacy.
Yeah.
And even though someone has been deceased, yet they speak.
Like Billy Graham.
Yeah, exactly. And
Reverend Billy Graham, excuse me.
It continues on, and you're to instill that in others. But I want everybody to know, no matter what age you are as a parent, being a parent is never a problem. It's a privilege.
Oh, wow. That's good.
Yeah.
That's really good,
It's
yeah.
a privilege. And if we see it as a problem, we get older. Sometimes I've seen families as a pastor. I've done funerals and things, and all of a sudden, even at the funeral, before or after, this conversation always comes up. Well, you know what? They think they're going to get this from me. They're not getting it. They think they're getting that land. They're not getting it. They think, and all of a sudden, it can sever a family relationship. Why?
Yeah.
Do you think that ever get to an age? I will never get to an age where I say, what I have is not yours. If I have something, y'all will always have opportunity to come and do that and spend time with me, and everything I have is yours. And I guarantee you, any parent worth their salt listening would say the same thing. Not that we're entitling or enabling, but if your children ever get in a problem, no matter how old they are, you will always be there to help them.
And that's a great parent.
Right.
I see a lot of parents now, especially with our generation, we pop out kids and then, oh, that's it. We hand them off to our parents or our grandparents or our friends who also have kids or something like that. And then we just go on and live our lives anyways. But we post pictures, to Facebook or Snapchat and act like we're good parents. And, we're present and stuff, just making some false persona.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. You're just dropping your kid off and you're not a present parent. And your child is the one suffering because of your decisions.
Yeah.
And these people, these parents, they need to know that sometimes you're all your child has. And it is your responsibility to be there for your child. And if you're working on being there for yourself and being there for God and saying, God, here I am, help me to be a good parent, you watch your relationship with your child be blessed. Mark my words.
Yeah.
Jesus can repair any relationship with anyone.
And one thing the Bible says about certain people, that category of whether it's a widow, talking about like single moms and children, especially orphans, the Bible's clear on that. You better treat them the way that you should, and not take advantage of them. And that's why watching some of these shows where maybe shouldn't mention the name of the show, but it's like a former CEO or executive, a leader of a company will come in and they talk to different people. And a lot of times when they see this single mom or single dad, and they're struggling and they're trying to support 5 or 6 people in their home, I love it at the end of that show.
That was blessing,
when that CEO comes in and says, I'm going to help you. You're taking care of your mom. You're taking care of your niece and your child. You're working hard. I'm going to give you $50,000. And you see a lot of times these people, they just almost collapse. Why is that? Because that money and that help represents a better way of life.
Yep.
And so if you're older and you've acquired a lot of wealth and all that, the Bible says that you should pass that down as inheritance. And I take that seriously. As a man, I'm supposed to leave an inheritance for my children's children.
Yep.
And we should always let them know it's not just mine. It's to pass down, and especially when we see these single parents, our hearts go out to them. So help them if you're able. Help them. Doesn't matter if they're not your biological child or not. Help them.
Yeah, bless them.
Yeah, and God will bless that. There's certain people in society that need that help.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah, but it's great to be a parent, and I would just say encourage every parent listening. Again, if you want to be the best parent you can be, let God work on your heart. Become the best husband, wife you can be, and through that, y'all parent together. And I'm telling you, kids that have a foundation biblically and see that.
Oh yeah.
That's the thing. We all struggle. We've all made mistakes, but let's own up those mistakes and try to do better. It's never too late for your children to see God change you, and you become a better person in the Lord.
Wow, that's great.
That will encourage them.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for watching the podcast today. And remember, if you're a parent, no matter what age you are, let's keep praying together, working together to be the best parents we can be.
And if you have any questions, please email us or leave a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching.
God bless you.